Let me start off by saying that I believe that ICT is going to play the critical role in allowing us to address the great challenges that face us here in the 21st century. Those challenges are very clear. A global financial meltdown of an epic scale, unprecedented since the Great American Depression. Number two, a great global energy crisis that threatens the very basis of our society. And three, real-time impacts of climate change, which now threaten our species and pose great risk to life on this planet. We have never before in history been at a point where so many crises have come together which literally threaten our survival. ICT is going to play a critical role in helping us address these great crises. Let me begin the discussion with a little anecdote. When Chancellor Merkel became Chancellor of Germany, she asked me to come to Berlin to help her government address the question, how do we grow the German economy in the 21st century? When I got to Berlin, the first question I asked the Chancellor is, Madam Chancellor, how do we grow the German economy, or for that matter the European or world economy, in the last stages of a great energy era? This is the key question. We are in the sunset of a great energy revolution: coal, oil, natural gas, uranium. Is there anyone here in this room in Brussels today that thinks we're in the sunrise of these energies? Of course not. Sunsets take a long time. We're going to be in this twilight period for many decades to come, but what is becoming clear in the business community and in government is that the benefits that we are getting from these energies are now being canceled by the problems attendant to these energies. We are reaching a watershed, if you will, an entropy wall for the second industrial revolution. Now, it raises some problems. What do? It's all about fossil fuels. We grow our food and petrochemical fertilizers and pesticides. Our plastics, our construction and building materials are petrochemical based. Most of our pharmaceutical products, our clothes, all of our supply chain, our logistics, our infrastructure, our power, our transport, our heat, our light. When future generations look back on us, they're going to call us the oil people. We built an entire civilization off fossil fuels. But now, in the sunset of this energy revolution and the second industrial revolution, we have three crises. They are epic in nature. They're feeding off each other. They're creating a perfect storm. The global financial meltdown, the energy crisis, and the real-time impacts of climate change. The global meltdown in the financial community and the business community. This is not a short-term recession. We are dealing with an economic catastrophe on the scale of the Great Depression. We built globalization on American consumption. American consumers bought the goods and services of the world. But we paid a heavy price, and that is the American families have gone broke financing globalization. We had a 9% savings rate in 1991 per family. Today it's almost negative. American families spend more than they make. We had a great credit boom in the 90s with credit cards, and then with cheap credit and interest rates on home mortgages. So we went back to work, we made our goods and services, and we bought all sorts of things from all over the world with American consumption, but it was based on a house of cards, a false foundation. It was all based on debt. So today, the total household debt in the United States, and this is going to surprise you in Brussels, the total household debt in my country is $12.5 trillion. American families are broke. And so globalization has come to a halt because we were the purchasers of the world's goods and services. We're not going to be able to bail out the American economy in 2 years. This crisis took 20 years in the making, and we have $12.5 trillion in home debt to make up for. So we're in it for the long run. We have to rethink how we approach globalization in the 21st century. The second crisis is the energy crisis. One of the other assumptions on globalization was that we could move our capital to cheap labor markets, produce our goods and services there, and then ship them back to the home country because energy was a cheap commodity. That's no longer the case. When energy prices went over $50 a barrel in the last few years, inflation started to embed into all the prices, from food to manufactured goods. When energy went over $100 a barrel, inflation reared its head. So I'm sure you remember back last year when energy prices hit $147 a barrel, the cost of food in the supermarket had gone up, the cost of petrol for your car, your home heating, everything went up. When we hit $147 a barrel, we hit what I call peak globalization, a firewall. The global economy stalled because the inflation built into all of our goods and services, because they all depend on fossil fuels, was too great. Purchasing power went down. Consumers stopped spending all over the world, and the global economic engine stalled. As a result, energy prices went down because we weren't using the energy. We were no longer fueling the global economy. So we've hit the outer wall of globalization at $147 a barrel. It's called peak globalization. And so even if we do try to reinstate our global economy, we can't go beyond that wall. We'll keep hitting the wall and going back, hitting the wall and contracting. So we have an energy crisis. The third crisis is the real-time impacts of climate change. It's now here. The fact is that our scientists and our new models are telling us that it's much worse than we had projected. We're now seeing many, many feedback loops that we did not anticipate. You know, in 2007, our scientists issued their long-awaited assessment report on climate change. And what they're telling us is that we may go up 3 degrees or more Celsius in this century. Now, that doesn't sound like much, but remember, 3 degrees Celsius, if we rise just that amount in the temperature, that takes us back to the temperature on Earth 3 million years ago in the Pliocene. Different flora, different fauna, different ecosystems, different planet. If we go 2 to 3 degrees, and that's a very optimistic figure, if we go 2 to 3 degrees, our scientists tell us that we might risk the potential extinction of between 30% and 70% of all the plant and animal species on Earth, perhaps in this century. Now, we need to be very clear. We have had 5 waves of biological extinction on this planet in the last 450 million years of life on Earth. 5 wipeouts. Every time we had a wipeout, it took 10 million years to recover the biodiversity that was lost. As my wife says, we're not grasping the enormity of this moment in history. Our species, anatomically modern humans, we've been here about 175,000 years. We're not grasping this. But it's even worse than we projected. Last year, James Hansen, who's the chief climatologist for the United States government, he's the head of the NASA Goddard Institute, he's our chief climatologist. He and his team went down under the oceans and they were analyzing core samples, and what they found was shocking to us. That, you know, at the EU, the idea is that we would try to get the world to mitigate CO2 to 450 parts per million. And if that were to happen and we only had 450 parts per million CO2, we'd only go up 2 degrees Celsius in this century. We'd be able to weather the storm of climate change. Well, then Jim Hansen's team came along and said their studies show that if we just mitigate CO2 at 450 parts per million, we don't go up 2 degrees Celsius, and I want you all to listen to this, we go up 6 degrees Celsius in this century, and this is a quote, "the end of human civilization as we have come to know it."